for McKinnon. Only Austin Eckler had more red zone targets and targets inside the 10 than Jerick McKinnon. And I just think with the way this offense is going to look, we're going to see – I still think Ron Rivera at his core wants them to run the football, but they'll throw more, there'll be more creativity. And Gibson, despite not being, the 20-touch running back we might have hoped, he was still really efficient in the passing game last season. So I think he can catch 55 balls in this offense and on top of getting, still a handful of carries. But I did lean more towards Diontae Johnson, who's I feel like becoming like one of the more polarizing players in fantasy. I just think at the end of the day, what we saw from Kenny Pickett last year was encouraging enough to down the stretch. Diontae Johnson, we know he didn't score a touchdown, but I would be more worried if Diontae Johnson scored 0 touchdowns and had 2 end zone targets, right? But he scored 0 touchdowns, but was 9th in the league in end zone targets. He had 29% of Pittsburgh's red zone targets, which was the 9th highest rate in the NFL. And he's just, again, you can't have that type of volume and not score. It just doesn't happen. He's 5th in the NFL in targets over the past 3 seasons, and he's right there with, it's elite company, right? It's Adams, it's Stephon Diggs, it's Justin Jefferson, it's Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill. He's right up there because he gets open. According to FTN data, he had a 36% target share against man coverage. And when writing about the Steelers' offense, I don't love a lot of what Matt Canada's done, but the one thing I do like that helps Diontae Johnson, on top of being an incredible receiver in terms of route running, they run a ton of bunch formation. They were top 10 in bunch formation last season, which is really tough when you're playing man coverage against Diontae Johnson because everybody's scrambled. It's tough to follow him. And then on top of that, he's just really good at football too. So Diontae Johnson in redraft obviously has been a crazy value. He's starting to get up there in ADP a little bit, but it's even in Dynasty, still a relatively young player. I think the offense isn't going to become Kansas City or Cincinnati or Buffalo, but Kenny Pickett showed me a lot down the stretch last season. I just want to see more. And I think what they were missing was go routes, right? Kenny Pickett was top 5 in percentage of passes on go routes. There was no layups designed for him. If they change that, that'll be Diontae Johnson, and he's going to get, he's probably going to be top 12 in targets this year anyway. Give him 6-7 touchdowns, which you probably expect, and he'll probably be right back to being, I have him inside my top 24, so.
Yeah, I've been kind of the lukewarm guy on Diontae Johnson all along. I think he's so format dependent. In a PPR league, I absolutely agree with you. He's being undervalued. People are making too much of the lack of touchdowns. In a non-PPR league, I have no interest. I agree he'll probably be top 12 in targets. I think we can also probably bet on him being bottom 12 in yards per target.
Yeah.
And he's going to score probably 4 or 5 touchdowns. I think he's going to be a high-end number 3 wide receiver. Chris, I want to, and I know you've got something to say about Diontae, so we'll start with him. Both of these guys that he mentioned, I would mostly agree. I want to tell you where I have them, and you tell me if you're buying at that cost. So Diontae Johnson, I have at wide receiver 36.
Yeah, that seems fine. I've got him at wide receiver 32, and
that is dynasty.
Yeah. No, I mean for this year, I've got him at wide receiver 32, so I have him valued a little more. He's 27.
Yeah, right at where he should be for about at the peak of his career.
Yeah, so he's not so close that you feel like he's going to fall off, and I have a lot of questions about the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. I think I'd rather try to avoid them for 2023, but I do feel like there's a chance that Diontae Johnson, that this might be his last year in Pittsburgh, and I think that'd be fine. I just don't really love the Matt Canada offense. I'm not a Kenny Pickett guy. I think they're probably looking for a new quarterback at the end of this season. Diontae Johnson's so fascinating, though, because it's really hard to disentangle his production and his poor per route efficiency from just the fact that offense has not been efficient at all whatsoever for the 3 seasons where he's been such a big part of it. It was Ben Roethlisberger when he couldn't throw the ball down the field, and then it was rookie Kenny Pickett. How much of Diontae Johnson's lack of efficiency is inherent to Diontae Johnson and how much is inherent to the offense? I think it's probably a bit of both. I think I looked it up, there were 13 seasons since Diontae Johnson joined the Steelers. So the Steelers have had 13 seasons where a wide receiver had at least 50 targets. And he is 3 of the bottom 5 in terms of yards per target, and his best one is 7th out of 13. So even within the context of this offense, he's been very inefficient. He's a very interesting test case in how good a wide receiver can be while being elite at route running and apparently not good at anything else. So I think it's fine to buy him at wide receiver 36 just because it seems unlikely he's not going to return that value in the next couple of years at least.
Yeah,
The other thing too, sorry,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the other thing when Chris was talking about Matt Canada's offense, it's they were bottom 10 in targets to the middle of the field. Like it was literally perimeter routes on go routes to George Pickens and Deontay Johnson. Like we see this with the elite wide receivers, right? Just we know they can win on the outside against anybody, but it's more advantageous to play them in the slot. Like, and Deontay Johnson was 13% slot rate last season. Like Matt Canada did such a bad job of creating layups for Kenny Pickett. That's why he was top 5 in percentage of passes on go routes and percentage of passes into tight windows. Like, I struggle to believe he'll suddenly change that. The only thing that's really creative about his offense is they ran jet sweeps like 10% of the time. It was the highest rate in the league. And that's not really Deontay Johnson. That was more Chase Claypool. If they start to do that and get more middle of the field layups, stuff like that, where, like, yeah, Deontay Johnson and George Pickens are really talented, and they can make plays in one-on-one coverage on the outside more often than not, but you don't have to necessarily rely on that every single time you
Make
drop
their
back
jobs
pass.
easier.
Exactly. Like, look at some of the elite receivers. Cooper Kupp. We know Cooper Kupp can win against anybody, but Sean McVay puts him in motion pre-snap, puts him in the backfield, and it's like, oh, we have this amazing wide receiver, and now he's like incredibly more amazing because he's playing against linebackers. Like, I was looking at some of the data we have at FTN Fantasy, like CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, they were both like top 5 in routes against linebackers. Like, we love that. Like, I want to see Deontay Johnson. We talk about his route running. Look what he does against defensive backs, let alone what he could do against a linebacker in coverage. I want to see more of that.
Yeah, it's funny. I was writing for the FFT newsletter yesterday about just what to watch in training camp, and one of them was like, what did the new offensive coordinators do and stuff like that. But the problem with that is I remember when Matt Canada took over for the Steelers, there was so much excitement among the people covering the Steelers in particular about all the pre-snap motion and everything that they were adding to the offense. And I think on the whole, we've been pretty disappointed in what Matt Canada's offense has actually looked like. So that's just to add another bit of advice when you're thinking about fantasy, is just training camp hype, especially when it comes to coaching, is nothing really.
Well, buckle in.
Speaking of training camp hype, let's get to the news. No, we actually have some real news. Early on, Saquon Barkley agreed to a contract, a very strange deal. It seems like he basically took the same money, but he gets $1 million if he has a career year. He gets
$2 million earlier.
Yeah, he gets $2 million earlier, which, you know, the time value of money, Chris, we talk about that all the time in our free time. So, a Saquon Barkley in Dynasty, this does actually, like, it removes the tiniest bit of risk. And I think, like somebody in the chat says here, go get Josh Jacobs if someone is offering. There's a very good chance Jacobs now signs for slightly more. That is kind of the way these things work. I really have a hard time believing any running backs were ever going to sit out games just because there's no money available for running backs ever. But
they're so disincentivized to do so. There's no winning there.
There's no winning. So I have Barkley right now as my RB7 in Dynasty. We'll play a little game of too high, too low, or just right. Here are the 3 running backs on either side. Just ahead of him, I have Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Jacobs. Just behind him, I have Travis Etienne, Austin Eckler, Ramondre Stevenson. Chris, is that just high, just right? Too high, too low for Saquon Barkley? I kind of feel like he should be like 3rd because we should just rank all running backs in Dynasty exactly the same way we do in redraft, because this is the only year that matters.
Yeah, like, he's not, that's mostly true, I think. Like, I think it's probably the next 3 years for most running backs, but obviously when you're talking about, like, Derrick Henry, this might actually be the only year he matters for fantasy again. Right. So you have to keep that in mind. But Barkley is 26, so I think that makes sense. Like, Eckler's a year or 2 older than him. Jacobs is almost exactly a year younger than him, so I think that order makes perfect sense. Like, Gibbs is the younger guy, maybe. I don't want to say, I feel like we kind of fall into the trap of just, if someone's younger, they're the more high upside option, but, like, I think it's incredibly unlikely Jahmyr Gibbs actually has a higher ceiling over the next 2 or 3 years than Saquon Barkley, given that Saquon Barkley's actual like observed ceiling is a top 3 running back.
Right. Adam, I wanted to ask you about that. Like, this bothers me a little bit with any running back when they're on the last, like, people talk about it, they want the running backs on those contract years because they're allegedly going to run harder or try harder or whatever. But for me, like, if Jahmyr Gibbs tears an ACL this year, he's going to be on a team next year. He's going to be on a team the year after that. If Saquon tears an ACL this year, he might be a backup for somebody next year and out of the league in 2 years.
Right, yeah, and I have Saquon at running back 6 right now. Like, to me, like, this obviously impacts, it really takes away the risk of him sitting out games this year, obviously, but, like, I believe they can still just franchise tag him again next season, right?
Yep.
So, like, for Dynasty, obviously this year, yes, we're going to get Saquon Barkley playing for the Giants, but next year, like, it didn't really change much for me going forward, because what if we're in the same situation this time next season again, and all of a sudden we're dealing with it? So, yeah, you said running back 7. I have him at 6. So
we're gonna go just right on that one. News item number 2: Javonte Williams surprisingly not on the PUP. I'm taking this in a cautiously optimistic way. I think sometimes these teams use the PUP differently, and it's possible that Javonte Williams doesn't start on the PUP, but does the same thing Breece Hall's doing right now, which is running in a straight line at practice, and the two teams are just calling it something different. But are you feeling better about Javonte in the year coming off the ACL, which has been a problem for guys even if they don't miss time? And then how are you feeling about him long term? Because this is a guy who was in everybody's top 6 for sure in Dynasty a year ago. I've got him at RB17 right now.
yeah, so for me, when I saw the news, like, obviously Javonte for Dynasty will continue to be ranked higher, as he should, but, like, I kind of wanted to just keep trying to trade for Samaje Perine in Dynasty leagues when I saw this, because his value is, like, I remember in a few leagues that I'm in, I tried to trade for him for some depth at the running back position, and some of the league mates were like, I don't want to, like, I have no interest. And now you might be able to trade for him. And, like, if Javonte starts week 1, I don't envision him getting a ton of work. And we have to remember with Javonte, as good as a prospect as he was and is, and a player as he is, like, North Carolina, he split with Michael Carter.
Mm-hmm.
First 2 seasons, split with Melvin Gordon. And now you have Sean Payton, who's loved using multiple running backs. You look at the last couple seasons, or from 2016 to 2020 for Sean Payton, the number 2 running back averaged 173 touches per year. So, like, whether it was Kamara, Ingram, Pierre Thomas, Sproles, Reggie Bush, Chris Ivory, Tim Hightower, like, Samaje Perine is going to play and get touches whether Javonte Williams is 50% healthy or 100% healthy. So, yes, this is good news for Javonte for obviously being able to maybe even start week 1, and obviously for his dynasty future. But I still think this is also, to me, and maybe that's just kind of how my mind works, I view this as an opportunity to go out and try to trade for Samaje Perine, because I envisioned him having a role this whole time, whether Javonte was fully healthy or not.
All right, Chris, we're the third news item, of course, we have to spend a little bit more time on because it's about the Chiefs. No, because it's about the Chiefs wide receivers. And first off, obviously the news item is Kadarius Toney hurt his knee fielding a punt the first day of training camp. There have been some conflicting reports, but he's going to miss multiple weeks. They are hopeful he will be ready for the start of the season. It is possible he will not. It's possible he'll be ready for the start of the season and get hurt week 1. But we've gone through most of this summer with the buzz about Kadarius Toney is the Chiefs' number 1 wide receiver. And I thought that was a little bit much.
Jobs opened up for
I thought
you.
the gap between Toney and Sky Moore was too big. But I think it's interesting, like, right now, when we saw the comment, I have removed Kadarius Toney from my board. I think some people feel like that. Right now, in a dynasty startup draft, you've got Kadarius Toney, you've got Sky Moore, you've got Rashee Rice. Everybody's talking about Richie James the last couple of days. I don't think that's actually going to be a thing.
Rob.
We saw last year, Mecole Hardman had a month-long stretch as a top 12 wide receiver. Juju had a 2-month-long stretch as a top 24 wide receiver. I don't think it's just as simple as Travis Kelce's the only pass catcher that's going to matter on this team. How are you viewing those 3 young wide receivers, Toney, Sky Moore, Rashee Rice, and do you think anybody else is going to matter for Dynasty, Chris?
I think it's, like you said, it's unfair to say that Travis Kelce is the only one that matters. I think the problem is it just one guy that matters, or is it 3 different guys at 3 different times? That's the bigger concern for me. In redraft, I've had Tony and Moore ranked back-to-back the entire process. It's like 42 and 43. In NFC ADP, Sky Moore is going 50 picks behind Kadarius Toney before the injury, which is just ludicrous. There's no justification for it. I don't care that Toney has had like 7 good quarters in the NFL. I can't justify it. In Dynasty, I think you probably just throw Rashee Rice in that group and just have them ranked basically right next to each other. If you want to have them as low-end wide receiver 3s, because there's a ton of upside with Kelce at some point on the way out, and that team having to transition to other pass catchers. If you want to have them in the more like the wide receiver 4 range, I think that makes sense. But on the whole, I think it makes the most sense to have them ranked relatively close to one another. Similar draft capital across the board. Rashee Rice hasn't played in the NFL. Nonetheless, similar amount of success at the NFL level between Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, and Rashee Rice. So I just think you throw them all out there, whichever one's cheapest, that's the one I want to buy.
Adam, I'm telling you right now that the wide receiver 1 for the 2024 Kansas City Chiefs is on the roster.
Sure.
Who is it and why?
Jerick McKinnon. I'm like half joking. Like, again, okay, so Jerick McKinnon last year was like 4th in the NFL.
I'm sorry, the regular season.
Yeah,
not the playoffs.
That's a good point. But no, like, I struggled to give up on Kadarius Toney, mainly because, well, A, I liked him as a prospect, and then B, his skill set is so perfect for Andy Reid's offense. It's just obviously the health. I still want to say Toney, I really do, but like you could have asked, I could have answered that earlier question, Heath, about the player to trade for before the season starts. That could have been Sky Moore, because I feel like he might be like one of the highest rising players in ADP.
Yep.
Especially because we know Toney won't practice for a few weeks. We think he plays week 1, but even then, he probably misses most of training camp. And then, at that case, Sky Moore is running, because the Chiefs are mainly a 2-wide set, right? They run a lot of 12 personnel. Kelce doesn't leave the field, obviously, but they don't run a lot of 3-wide sets. So MVS will always be on the field. He'll play the outside. And then it was really becoming, okay, well, Rashee Rice, Sky Moore, Toney be on the field. I thought Toney was the lead for that spot, but now Sky Moore could be playing in 2-wide sets. Obviously, when they go 3-wide, you'd think he'd be on the field too. I'm still going to lean Toney, but it's probably foolish. I just think he's still, I don't know, those 5 games he might play this year could be like really, really good. But like Sky Moore, I think it was yesterday, he said he's like way, way ahead of where he was last year. So that's obviously, A, not surprising going into a second year, and B, great to hear, but I'll still lean Toney for now.
Not just his second year in the NFL, but his 4th year playing wide receiver ever.
Right, and his first full season, and his first all-season, like, actually going into camp as a wide receiver and not playing, mostly on punt return.
And, like, the first time he's playing the same position with the same offense that he finished the previous season in. Because remember, Giants had a different coaching staff last year, obviously his rookie season, so... Like the thing that, in theory, I like about Kadarius Toney is the ability to line him up all over the field, use him in the running game. Like, that is really exciting in an offense like this that does take advantage of unique skill sets. It's just, you got to be on the field. And he's shown, I tend to be pretty injury agnostic, but, like, he's shown no ability. He had knee surgery this offseason. The first practice of training camp, he aggravates the knee that he had surgery on. It's so tough.
Speaking of injury concerns, I've got one more name to throw at you, Adam, and I'll just admit, I'm a sucker for guys who are like super elite at 18 or 19 years old, even if things go wrong after that. And the guy who was getting first team reps in practice yesterday was Justin Ross. Who has been working with Patrick Mahomes.
Has been talking about him. So.
Mahomes has been talking about him. This guy was that dude as a teenager, and then just couldn't stay healthy. Yeah. Is there any chance he's the answer? And shouldn't Dynasty
plays more games, him or Toney this year?
I would just say at the very least, and I know a lot of you guys already know this, we've talked about it in the podcast before, if you're in a 14-team league, he's certainly rostered. A 12-team, he might be. But if you're in a 12-team league, the Dynasty, you should go check your waiver wire this morning just to see if Justin Ross...
I actually did, like, last week. He was not available. But, he 1,000% has to be... you have to make sure he's not out there.
And then, Chris, last news item, because I actually had missed this, but apparently Jamison Williams is hurt again as well. Suffered a leg injury. He's already not going to be able to play with the team for the first 6 weeks. If somebody offered you, like, they're the best team in the league, so you're convinced it's going to be the 12th pick next year, but you can still get a first-round rookie pick for Jamison Williams. Are you taking it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a dynasty / salary cap league. I've got him for $5 out of 120 budget this year, and like, I'm probably gonna keep him.
Yeah,
but
I'm scared.
That's mostly just because I have Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase for like $23 total. So it's like, right, I got a little money to play around with, so might as well. But like, I'm going to try to shop him, and see if I can get anything before I have to make that decision on whether I'm going to keep him for $5. Because, it's just one catch as a rookie, not going to play until week 7 this year. You're not going to be able to start him at the earliest until week 8. You got to see something. And so that's an awful long time to get absolutely nothing out of a player. I
think if you can get a first for him, you should go get a first for him. I think it's the safer move. That first is at least going to go up in value over the next year. We don't know what's going to happen to Jamison Williams. So let's take a short break, and then we'll get into some dynasty risers and fallers from the last month. So it is Dynasty Rankings Update Week at CBS Sports. By the end of the week, you'll be able to go to the Dynasty landing page, see updated quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end rankings. You'll see a new top 150 with a trade chart, and you will see, for the first time since May, an updated rookie rankings. Because I thought, there's surprisingly still a lot of people that do their rookie draft like late in training camp or after the preseason. And maybe that makes more sense than doing it in May when we make lots of dumb picks. It's okay, you make dumb picks in August as well. 3 guys who rose for me, and they're all wide receivers in the last month. One of them obvious, DeAndre Hopkins going from wide receiver 46 to wide receiver 39. Elijah Moore from wide receiver 38 to wide receiver 31. And Brandon Ayuk from wide receiver 32 to wide receiver 29. I want to start with Ayuk, Adam, because this 49ers offense this year it's one of those that's frustrating. Like, we think they're going to have a bunch of production, but it's definitely a too many mouths to feed situation. Somebody's going to lose out at their current ADP, whether it's Kittle or Debo or Ayuk or McCaffrey. But Dynasty, obviously, this year you don't have to worry about that quite as much. And I think sometimes Dynasty managers get in trouble with really talented players, ranking them too low because there's too many mouths to feed in their offense. There's been a lot of positive talk about Brandon Ayuk and how good he's looked this offseason. Do you think he could make the leap and be like a top 15 guy in the next year?
So it depends, because if I'm not mistaken, like, after this season, San Francisco will have to like do some maneuvering to keep both Debo and Ayuk, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So and Debo's talked about how he didn't like how he played last year, and he's totally, and I fully believe him. Like, Debo's an incredible player, but like, if he doesn't play amazing, or if he misses time again, like, they might be more inclined to just, extend Ayuk and move on from Debo. And if that's the case, then there's less target competition going into 2024. Ayuk's already established himself, in my opinion, as one of the most underrated wide receivers in football. Talked about Deontay Johnson's route running ability. I think Ayuk might actually be, if not right there, like, he might be better. Like, he's that good. In terms of his ability to manipulate defenders. That's why he was really up there. I think he 26% target share against man coverage. So, yeah, like, it is such a tough team to break down, because, like, you look at Kittle, for instance, his splits when McCaffrey, Ayuk, and Debo were all playing full games were terrible, for instance. But Ayuk was still at least a little bit steady. His touchdown luck was pretty, it was, I guess, the opposite of Deontay Johnson, where he only had 5 end zone targets but scored 8 touchdowns. But again, that goes in line with him being able to get separation. I'm really high on Ayuk. So it really does depend, though, if both him and Debo are there in 2024, I guess it would be. But overall, as a player, if he ascended himself, we saw it last year. If he ascended even more and even higher this season, I would not be surprised. He's that good.
Chris, just real quick, and we'll move on to the next guy, but Brandon Ayuk or Deontay Johnson in Dynasty?
I would go with Ayuk. I just think he has a more well-rounded skill set.
So number 2 here, Elijah Moore, another guy who just the drumbeat of off-season news and videos of him with Deshaun Watson, up from wide receiver 38 to 31. Chris, this is a guy who had a good draft pedigree, flashed as a rookie, completely disappeared, but now goes to a team that wants him and has Deshaun Watson, who, if he bounces back, could be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. where are you at on Elijah Moore? Is this kind of boom bust number 3 wide receiver range right in the same range as Ayuk and McLaurin make sense with him being 3 or 4 years younger than those guys, or is this too high or too low?
No, I think that makes sense. I think like Ayuk makes a little more sense as an obvious buy with an eye on 2024, perhaps because of the contract situation that Adam was talking about. Whereas Moore, more or less, seems locked in with the team that he's on. I guess Cooper, there's a chance that I don't know what his contract situation is, but he's old enough that you could see them potentially looking to move on from him after this year if things go south. So yeah, I think both these guys, it makes sense the range that they're in. I mean, Moore had it was like a 7-game stretch his rookie season where he was he a top 5 wide receiver his last 7 games? He was outrageously good. And that was playing, obviously, with Zach Wilson, and was Joe Flacco still the backup there? It was not great quarterback play. So yeah, it's entirely possible that we're 6 games into the season and we're viewing Elijah Moore as a top 20 wide receiver for both redraft and dynasty. It's not the likeliest outcome, but the combination of opportunity and talent is absolutely there.
Yeah, I will say, Adam, 1 year ago, I always keep the running tab on the left side of my rankings of where I had guys ranked a year ago, and I just looked. Elijah Moore was wide receiver 20 for me. I felt like 1 year ago we were entering into year 2, and I was a little bit upset about the Garrett Wilson pick, but I thought, they can just both be really good. Where are you? You still have quite a bit of hope for Elijah Moore?
Yeah, and not that I'm breaking news here, but I don't know how it happened in one of my home redraft leagues last year. I actually ended up with Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore, and I can fully say they were both not good. One was very good. Yeah, so Kevin Stefanski keeps talking really highly of Elijah Moore. They've been talking about moving him all over the formation. I believe Amari Cooper 2025 or 2026, his contract is up. Donovan Peoples-Jones, though, was after this season. So, and I like what DPJ did last year. But yeah, Elijah Moore should give them more flexibility with their offense, more versatility. And when I wrote the Cleveland Browns article for FTN Fantasy, as you'd expect, their offense really changed when Deshaun Watson took over. So from weeks 1 to 12, they were at 16% play action, 2% RPO usage, 56% shotgun rate, and 63% bunch formation. But in the weeks Deshaun Watson was under center, their play action rate went up to 26%, their RPO usage went up to 5%, they were at shotgun 7% more often, and they went more spread offense. They were like bunch formation, like 30% less, which means more spread, more 3-wide, more ways to get Elijah Moore on the field. It's always scary buying into the hype during this time of year, but between the change in offense and what we're hearing from Elijah Moore in Cleveland, I'm kind of in on it.
That's the thing, though, is that my gut instinct is just to fade any player that is getting highlight videos posted by reporters on Twitter.
So you're fading everybody in the league then, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's just we've fallen for this so many times. Cortland Sutton this time a year ago is going to be I'm going to stick with that example for the next 5 years because the amount of evidence-free hype that guy got was outrageous. And so I think generally speaking, it's probably smarter to avoid. This guy looks great in camp. That should mean absolutely nothing to you. If a beat reporter says a guy is making plays, fade them entirely.
I think the opposite should mean more.
Yeah, I think you should look for concrete details. With Elijah Moore, the thing that I saw yesterday, and obviously it's the first day that they're practicing, and Amari Cooper wasn't even there, but is that in their 3 wide receiver sets, Elijah Moore was still playing the slot. And that's one of the things that I want to keep an eye on with him, because this is a team that historically has run a lot of 2 tight end, 12 formation type of stuff. And so if that's going to be the case, being one of the 2 outside receivers is going to be a key. If he's coming off the field in 12 formation, it's going to be really hard. It's not impossible. Amon-Ra St. Brown was coming off the field a lot in 2 wide receiver sets. His rookie season was still very good. But it's just, that's the thing I'm going to be keeping an eye on. It doesn't matter that it was just the first day, but if we get 3 weeks from now and it's still Elijah Moore's the slot guy in 3 wide receiver sets and he's coming off the field in two wide receiver sets, then I'll be a little bit concerned, at least for the 2023 value.
I do think they will run way more wide this year because their 12 personnel rate actually went down last year too, with first year without Austin Hooper there. And I think the way their offense was looking from weeks 13-18 last year, where they ran a lot more shotgun, they ran more 11 personnel. I think they run a lot more 11.
I think that would be good, and really it makes sense. Like, you can still throw to David Njoku 85, 95 times and run 3 wide. That
Nick Chubb doesn't need 2 tight ends blocking him for him to be good. You know,
his metrics running from the shotgun formation were still elite. So
right. Okay, third wide receiver, DeAndre Hopkins, with the signing with the Titans. He was wide receiver 46, and I've got him up to wide receiver 39. He's an impossible player to rank for both rebuilders and contenders because he should be like 30 spots higher for contenders. But he is somebody who I was kind of discounting as old, changing teams. I'm not really that into it. And then I went and looked last year at what he did with Kyler Murray, and even what he did, like basically 2 yards per route run, with 60% of his targets coming from Colt McCoy and I think Trace McSorley.
Yeah, and the Trace McSorley game, I think he had 1 catch on 10 targets or something. It was
that
wild
game was
how
so
awful
brutal
he
because I was facing Tampa Bay's defense in fantasy that week. It was so bad.
So I have zero evidence that DeAndre Hopkins has lost a step. And I think that there's a chance that he just goes into Tennessee and earns a 30% target share. Mm-hmm. And even if they throw the ball 500 times, that's still 160 targets. So I guess we talked about go get a first for Jameson Williams if you still can. Adam, if you're a contender, like a true contender, and you've got a wide receiver spot that you wouldn't mind adding some depth, are you willing to give up a first-round pick to go get DeAndre Hopkins?
First is tough, but in general, I do like Hopkins because Cliff Kingsbury's offense in Arizona, it was very frustrating because he just didn't move wide receivers around the formation. So in his 3 seasons with the Cardinals, Hopkins ran 89.6, 70, pretty much 80, and then 62% of his routes just from the left side of the field. Like, he rarely moved, and whether you think he's lost a step or not, I think we're at the point of his career where you want to play Hopkins inside more and not have him have to win on the outside at all times. So I think we're going to see that from Tim Kelly, who's obviously the OC there and was with Hopkins in Houston. So I'm excited for that. I think he plays a lot more of the slot kind of late stage of his career, and Treylon Burks, so they can do a lot with him still. But first is tough. But yeah, like if you view yourself as like the clear favorite, and maybe even in season too, right? Like one of your wide receivers goes down and Hopkins is there first 4 weeks or something, getting 8 targets per game and a 27% target share. Yeah, and if you're all in, late first, which you would expect it to be, I don't think it's crazy because I agree with you that I don't think Hopkins is close to being done.
No, and that's the thing is you look at like aging curves and they show that like 31 is like, man, very few wide receivers are good past 30. And the thing is, that's true. Very few wide receivers are very good at 30. DeAndre Hopkins already was. So that's one of those things where, like, aging curves are relevant and players can drop off very quickly. We see that all the time. But if you're really good at 30, chances are you're still going to be really good at 31. You're still going to be really good at 32. Now, there's the chance of a big drop-off, and you should probably project them to be worse. And given the changing circumstances for Hopkins, that makes sense. But, yeah, I think buying, if you're a contender, makes a lot of sense. I've got a team that's built around Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, and Tyler Lockett. Might go throw an offer out for DeAndre Hopkins. Let's go all in.
You might as, the rebuild's only
You
gonna
only
take 2 years.
live once.
Yeah, that's the name of the league. I don't know if it was the same league, but I'm pretty sure it is.
It's the same.
It's the same league. Let's get to the fallers. Only a couple of these as well. I put Dalvin Cook in here. He was my running back 25. He's now my running back 30. I kind of feel like I might move him down another 5 to 10 spots after we finish this conversation. Because I look at Zeke, I look at Fournette, I look at Hunt. They're all already outside of my top 40. And I think about what's the history of 27, 28-year-old running backs who are free agents in the NFL at the start of August, which we're almost to, and then actually make an impact in fantasy football. I just wonder, especially with this recent news that Dalvin Cook allegedly tried to get somebody to take some money to take back some testimony. I've got real concerns that he's just not going to be a starting running back for fantasy football purposes again. Adam, where are you at on Cook, and do you have any hope for this quartet of veteran running backs? Like, I thought when Melvin Gordon signed with the Ravens, I mean, it's silly, first off. I don't think he's going to matter. But it really showed that the way you get signed as a running back, especially a veteran, is by be willing to take almost nothing guaranteed. And these guys don't seem to be willing to do that.
Yeah, I mean, for Dalvin for fantasy, like I feel like it either has to be Miami or I just don't have a lot of interest because I know it's been pretty much those three AFC East teams minus Buffalo that have been kind of linked to him with New England, the Jets, and the Dolphins. But like the Jets would be a train wreck. Miami would give me at least a little bit of hope, but right now I just don't see much there. I mean, teams clearly aren't in a rush to sign a running back. And like best case, Dalvin goes to Miami, where like they were, even with Mike McDaniel there, they transitioned to a pass first team, so like it wouldn't even be that good. I just think it would give them the best opportunity to get, most of the carries as opposed to obviously the Jets with Breece Hall, and then the Patriots with Ramondre Stevenson, who obviously we've seen them with, talking to Fournette and Darrell Henderson. So for me, I'm just kind of like there's really nothing I'm really looking at with Dalvin Cook right now. There's nothing really going on.
Chris, do you think that Dalvin Cook's even still good?
That's what I was looking at right now. Is you look at like the next gen stats, and there are reasons to be skeptical of the utility of those stats and how much they're team dependent and not player dependent. But he had the fourth lowest rush over expected rate in the NFL last season. He was below average in terms of per carry efficiency. He just by the eye test, it looked like he lost a step. Like I was going to make the joke that like is the case for him in Miami that everyone else is so much faster for